Hi, it's me, the asylum seeker of classical music, and you really like this album. Even if you don't know it, you really like this album. You've probably heard songs from it before, like this one. All for nothing at all. Or this one. It feels like flying, but maybe we're dying. Pretty popular on TikTok. They're kind of just one of those songs where everyone has heard, but no one really knows what it is or where it comes from. The album that they come from is Hawaii Part 2 by Miracle Musical. Now you're probably thinking, who the hell is Miracle Musical? And the short answer to that is Joe Hawley. Joe Hawley was one of the lead singers of Tally Hall, and the album was primarily written by him with some contributions from some of the other members of Tally Hall. Now it's pretty widely accepted that this album is a concept album, and basically what that means is that the songs follow a narrative and a story structure from beginning to end. Kind of like The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. Now I really love Hawaii Part 2 and I've been listening to it since like 2020 in the COVID times. So I thought I would offer my interpretation of the story and its meaning. So first off, I wanted to preface this by saying Hawaii Part 2 follows an opera structure similar to The Black Parade. And in an opera, the first act contains a song, which is basically a call to action from the audience to come listen to this tale, and then the introduction of the main characters. So Introduction to the Snow, the first song on the album, is that track which is basically saying, come listen to my story. Now the beginning of the Introduction to the Snow is musically identical to the final track on the album, Dream Suite in C major. This is important because it tells us the story is not happening in chronological order. What we're getting is the protagonist from the end of the story who's recalling back to the beginning and basically telling it from there. The reason why this is important is because, spoiler alert, somewhere along the line, the protagonist goes insane. This makes him an unreliable narrator, so he's telling the story of what happened, but the reality may not be exactly as he describes it. Some elements may be made up, or at best, metaphors for something that really happened. This is evident from the first line. Alone at the edge of a universe humming a tune. The protagonist says he's at the edge of the universe, which doesn't really make sense, but it does tell us metaphorically that he's on the brink of something. We don't know what that is yet. Also, stylistically, his voice sounds like it's coming from an old radio, and the harmonies sound a little bit like a 40s barbershop quartet. The narrator doesn't seem to know what time period he's in. And this comes back again later, so just remember that, the time period. Other than that, the first track is not really important. But the second song is Island to Thyself. This song introduces the main character, which everyone kind of seems to call Simon, so we're just going to call him Simon. This song is in past tense because remember, Simon at the end of the story is thinking back to the beginning. He's kind of calling out his mistakes in hindsight because now he knows that it's going to lead him down a dark path that he didn't really want. What did it matter? Why would it matter? Other than that, he's kind of just telling us themes through the story and who he is as a character, which is an isle unto thyself, which basically means he's like an independent dude. And then at the end of the song, there's a bit with really cool harmonies where he says lines like this one. Why did murderous animals survive? Again, that'll make more sense later, so just put a pin in that for now. The next song is Black Rainbows, which I believe introduces the other main character in the album, which is Simon's love interest. And this song is kind of bizarre, again, because Simon is insane, but the lyrics do seem to have romantic undertones and is sung by a different person other than Joe Hawley, which leads me to believe that this is a new character and this character is Simon's love interest. Up next is White Ball. This seems to be a ball where the protagonist and the love interest meet. And once again, the time period that we're in seems kind of ambiguous. And this is where I'm going to start my argument that Simon, since going insane, begins viewing his life like it's a medieval fairy tale. Like it's a Brothers Grimm story, basically. And White Ball is the first hint that we get of that. Clearly this isn't modern times because it's a ball. And ball is something that we'd more think taking place in the early modern period or maybe the late Middle Ages. I'm going more towards the late Middle Ages for reasons that I'll talk about later. Anyways, this is a duet between Simon and the love interest. Very romantic song, very beautiful song. And I believe at this point, Simon and the love interest are fully together. This is kind of their Romeo and Juliet love at first sight moment. The next song on the album is Murders, which, as you might have guessed, is about a murder. Now, this is another hint that Simon is viewing his life as though it were a medieval fairy tale, because he frequently talks about going into a forest. I was in the forest. Now, if we do trust that the story takes place in Hawaii, which would make sense because in the song Black Rainbows, there was chanting in Hawaiian. And later in the album, there are songs in Japanese, which makes sense because Hawaii has one of the highest populations of Japanese-speaking people that's not in Japan. And there aren't really a lot of traditional forests in Hawaii. There are more like tropical forests or rainforests. So I want to argue that the forest Simon is going into here is metaphorical. This is like the forest that protagonists in medieval fairy tales go into where the conflict happens. Think Into the Woods. It's like where Little Red goes to meet the big bad wolf. It's like where Jack goes to sell his cow and get his magic beans or whatever. So what the forest tells us is that the main conflict of the story is about to take place in this metaphorical forest. Now we get another reference to old folk tales in one of the first lines of the song. He found a girl, she found the Earl King. The Earl King is a German traditional folk tale about an elf king who lives in the forest and he kills children. There's a really popular poem written by Goethe about the elf king, and Schubert turned that into a song. So Joe Hawley is also probably referencing these works as well. And that tells us that the protagonist and the love interest are also pretty young because they are threatened by this elf king who traditionally only kills children. And at the end of the song, Simon discovers that his love interest is killed in this forest. And that's the really famous part from the song that everyone knows. Now, a lot of people think that Simon killed his love interest, and because he's an unreliable narrator, he doesn't explicitly say that. But I actually want to make the argument that it is not Simon, but it is someone else who kills the love interest. Specifically, I think that it was a jealous girl, a girl who was romantically interested in Simon and killed his love interest to have him to herself. I'll get more into my reasoning later on, but you can tell in the example Island to Thyself, remember there was that line about murderous animals surviving, and it doesn't make sense to me that Simon would call out these murderous animals if he himself were the one to kill her. The next song is in Japanese, but it translates roughly to Space Station Number 7. It's in Japanese and has a bit in French. I understand the French bit, not the Japanese bit. I do not speak Japanese. But given that the chorus of the song is literally just the word heaven, I'm pretty sure it's just the love interest going to heaven. Now, the next song is The Mind Electric, which is one of the coolest songs on the soundtrack. This song starts in reverse. So it goes from the ending, reverse to the beginning, and then in the correct order from the beginning to the ending. I think really the reason why it starts in reverse is to solidify the idea that Simon is thinking back to the beginning. He's starting at the end and going back to when these events happened. And The Mind Electric has yet more evidence that Simon is viewing these events through the scope of a medieval fairy tale. Take a listen to the first line of the song. Listen to the instrumentals. Think of these thoughts as limitless light, exposing, closing, circuitry of light. Now this song uses something called counterpoint, which is something that was used mostly in later Middle Ages / Renaissance music. It's kind of hard to see what I mean because in the song it's mostly like a bass synth that's used, but let me play it on a harpsichord so you can kind of hear it better. Now, essentially what counterpoint is when there are two or more different melodies happening at the same time in order to make one complete song. So in The Mind Electric, you have the tenor line, which is what the vocals are singing. And And then you have another melody being played in the bass. As you can probably hear better on the harpsichord, this is very medieval / Renaissance style of music. Now, in this song, the protagonist is essentially being put on trial for the murder of his love interest. He gets framed probably because he discovered her body in the song Murders, and he pleads insanity. Now, note, when these events were actually happening the first time, he was not yet insane. So likely the reason why he pleads insanity is because he thinks his case is hopeless and that he would be doomed to be sentenced to a guilty verdict. So he pleads insanity in order to get out of that. And the language is very medieval. It doesn't sound like something that people would be saying these days.
My brain has claimed its glory over me. I've a good heart, albeit insane.
So this song is called The Mind Electric. So after Simon pleads insanity, he is treated with electric shock therapy. He was not insane before, but the electric shock therapy makes him go insane. And then we have the most overtly medieval part of the entire album, when there is this metaphor that because Simon is insane, his brain is like a tyrannical lord and he is like a serf at the mercy of said lord.
Here in my kingdom, I am your lord, I order you to glower and pray.
Serfdom is explicitly mentioned here. Serfdom was the practice in feudalism in which peasants would essentially be slaves to the lords of the land that they worked. And again, I don't think it's true that this is really taking place in the medieval period, because I do believe that the story is happening in Hawaii. And it wouldn't make sense for a European-style fairy tale to be happening in Hawaii in the Middle Ages. Now, the next song is Labyrinth, which is a rap. It's a rap, and the synthesizer that is happening under the rap is again counterpoint, which is that later Middle Ages Renaissance style of music. And it's another metaphor. Simon is not literally in a labyrinth, but he feels like he is trapped inside of his own insane brain. And this song has a line which reinforces my idea that Simon's love interest was killed by a jealous girl, which is this line.
Behind me, my ex-girl's chasing me. In front of me, my next girl's facing me.
There seems to be two girls that are conflicting with each other here in the story. Now, the next song is Time Machine. It's about a time machine. Again, Simon's insane. This is more of a subconscious metaphor rather than an accurate depiction of the events that happened. He is not really building a time machine, but he has the idea where if he were to escape to somewhere where his past would not be affecting him, he would essentially be able to change the past for all intents and purposes.
Past is past, I'd rather than regret the old. I can live it back the other way.
He's essentially being escapist. He just wants to leave to escape the situation that he's in. And he hopes that this would solve his problem of insanity and heal him from the electroshock therapy. Now, Simon tries to escape via the sea. This is either real, he got on a boat and tried to escape the island he was on, or this is again another metaphor where he is in a coma and he's kind of on the sea of subconscious. I choose to believe that he is really at sea, mostly because it's cooler. And the next song is Stranded Lullaby, where he is lost at sea. Now, this song is directed towards someone, and I choose to believe that he is singing this towards the love interest that died. Another possible explanation is that he's singing this towards the girl who killed his love interest because of the line,
I'd like to know why you are all alone while I'm lost at sea.
because if the jealous girl's plan was to kill the love interest in order to have Simon to herself, her plan failed. Because of what happened to Simon, he is now gone and she is left all alone. So in that context, the song would essentially be Simon asking this girl if it was really worth it to kill someone, given that her motivations for killing her didn't end up playing out in the end. And then we arrive at the final song on the soundtrack, which is Dream Suite in C major, which is a masterpiece of a song. So again, the beginning of this song is musically identical to the first song on the track. And to me, what this means is we are now back in the present. Simon just spent all that time recalling what happened to get him to this point, and now we are here back at the present as things are truly happening. And this song also seems to indicate that a woman killed Simon's love interest because of this line.
She knows you heard her staging music murder.
Anyways, after a while of seeming to drift away, both physically and mentally, Simon is eaten by a whale. This whale is not real. And we know this for two reasons. One, the whale writes him a letter telling him that he is about to eat him.
Signed, yours truly, the whale.
Two, if you look at the album cover, this whale is depicted, and that doesn't look like fucking Shamu. That doesn't look like any whale I've ever seen. So I think because Simon is in a delirium here, he's hallucinating a whale, but really he's probably just dying of starvation, or he's finally giving in to his insanity, whatever. After this, we hear waves crashing on shore, because I think Simon's boat probably runs aground or he falls overboard or something, I don't know. But then we hear Simon harmonizing with the love interest. I believe this is them two meeting each other again in the afterlife. And then with the two of them riding the wave of the afterlife together, the album ends kind of abruptly. This is the interpretation that I believe to be most plausible after all the time I've spent listening to it. I love concept albums, so if there are any more concept albums or albums that you suspect are concept albums, please let me know. Also, Joe Hawley has other solo stuff, but then he started dropping a bunch of songs with slurs in the title, so I don't know if it's okay to support him anymore. But anyways, if you made it this far, please consider poking around the rest of my channel or subscribing if you see any other videos you like. I'm a very small channel with less than 100 subscribers, so anything helps. But until the next one, thank you and break legs.